Welcome to Casual Gardening with Dustin. So today I was really excited to make a video about hilling up potatoes and pruning tomatoes for growing up a steak. It's not that you can't find those subjects elsewhere on YouTube, it's just that I don't feel like any self-respecting gardening video channel is really hitting its stride unless it has those, and my garden's about ready to make those. Unfortunately, I can't make that video today because I have to make a different one. Today, rather than making a video about hilling up potatoes and pruning tomatoes up a steak, I'm going to make a video about covering the garden for late frosts. Because I've been watching the weather and it looks like I'm not going to dodge this one. We have some freezing weather coming into our, well, at least to the benches of our valley. I'm probably not going to see a freeze here, but it's going to get way too cold for tomatoes and possibly for squash, definitely for beans and corn. Temperature tonight is forecast to drop down to about 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is that much in degrees Celsius. And it's looking like it might get that low again tomorrow night. Essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you around the garden and show you some techniques for covering your crops to keep them safe because they're in the ground. The conventional wisdom where I live is that if it's after Mother's Day, it's a good time to plant your tomatoes. And it is after Mother's Day. It turns out not to be a good time to plant tomatoes after all. So really, you can use any material to cover your crop as long as it's completely covered and it has some insulation quality to it. The thicker it is, the better it will insulate, but keep in mind that if it excludes all light, you might uncover it and find a leggy plant if you keep it covered during the daytime. So I've got some fleece I'm going to be using on some of my beds. Those hoops that I built in are going to come in handy because for a lot of my beds I can just throw the fleece over the bed and it'll sit over the hoops and create a nice little climate in there, and I'm just going to leave those garden beds covered for 2 days. It's going to be overcast enough that I don't have to worry about overheating during the daytime. It's going to block about 30% of the incident light, but it'll also block a lot of the cold, so yay. We're also going to go through some things that you can do for smaller plants. Maybe you've just got one plant in a bed that needs to be covered and you don't want to cover your whole bed. A lot of my crops are warm season crop interplanted with cool season crops that haven't been picked out or died off yet or gone to seed yet. And so I don't need to cover my lettuce and I don't need to cover whatever spinach hasn't bolted yet. I don't need to cover my kohlrabi or my beets or my peas. They're all going to be fine. In fact, they're going to be thrilled to get that nice, cool, moist weather on them. So ideally, I want to discriminate as much as possible when I cover, but I am going to want to cover my loofah gourd. I'm going to want to cover as many of my beans as I can. I'm going to want to cover my corn seedlings that have come up. I'm going to want to cover all of my squash. I'm going to want to cover all of my peppers and all of my tomatoes and my ground cherries. I've got a lot to cover in this video. This bed contains ground cherries and a random sweet pepper that I didn't have room for in the other bed and I didn't want to throw out. So I can cover the whole thing. And I've got the hoops in place. It's going to be really easy. Watch this. Done. bed is covered, and because I'm able to use fleece in this case, I can just leave this cover over the bed for the next couple of days. Through warm weather and cold, it will be protected. It'll get a little warmer during the day, but nothing under here is going to mind that, and it's going to stay warm at night, which is what I really, really need. So, done. If you don't have a frame built into your fleece right off the bat, you can just drape your fleece over your bed and go from there. You can weight down the edges with rocks, you can use landscaping staples to staple them down. There's all sorts of stuff you can do to hold your fleece in place, and that's really all that matters, is it's going to stay there through the inclement weather while you are sleeping, because most of the cold happens, well, in my part of the world, it happens between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. and I'm not going to be awake for that. Alright, this bed is a challenge because I've got 8-foot tall stakes planted, well yeah, they are planted, they're driven into the ground next to every plant in this bed that's going to need covering. And some of these plants have been tied to those stakes. Saving grace for me is that I use these plant ties that are made of Velcro. So I can just take them off and undo my work tying them up. It turns out that is a good idea for more reasons than I originally thought. Right now, so I wanted to show you covering with just a grocery store paper bag. Not sponsored by Harmon's. Unfortunately, a lot of the plants in this bed that need to be covered are actually taller than the bag. So the only plant I've got that I can really use this on is my eggplant. That is not staked to the bed, and I'm not going to leave this here when the video is done because it's still the daytime and this blocks out all the light. So if you use a paper bag to cover a crop, remember to put it on when you don't care about that plant getting light anymore. Boom, covered. Once you've got your plant covered, I've got these landscape staples that I can use. I'll just staple down the handles of my paper bag. Oh, lettuce here in the way. There we go. So this will provide some protection from the cold on a temporary basis. This is something I'm going to want to come out and take off tomorrow morning so that my eggplant can get the light it needs. In this bed I have peas on one side, I have beets, and interplanted with them, and eventually it will outgrow them, I have loofah gourds. Loofah gourds are a climbing vine. That means that it has already put its tendrils around my stake and I cannot detach it without damaging my gourd, and I don't want to do that. I'm super excited. This is my first year actually getting loofah gourds in the ground and having them last for a decent amount of time. So of course, this is the year that we're gonna get late snow. Yay! So what I'm gonna do in this case is I'm gonna have to get creative because I have to cover enough of this stake to cover the gourd. So I'm gonna cut a piece of my fleece. If you have a towel, you can wrap a towel around here. Pillowcase, you'd need to cut it open. No, you can probably just wrap it around and get that double layer of protection. You could wrap a pillowcase around this and tie it on to the stake with something and just fasten the bottoms down. You don't have to do any one thing as long as you are covering your plant for the duration of your inclement weather. I have some fleece I can cut up, so that's what I'm gonna do here. Look at these bush beans. Look at these beans. This is awesome. My bush beans are coming up. Normally I would be thrilled, but now I wish they'd stayed in the ground for 2 more days because it is going to be too cold for bush beans for 2 more days. This is a lot to cover and I'm not sure I have the tools to do it with. So what I can do here, well, you've got a couple options. If I had compost or dirt that I wanted to use to cover these, what I would do is I would just pile that over the beans, and that would keep them covered for the next couple days like a blanket of sweet compost, and they'd be fine. And when it's over, I just let them grow up through the compost or dirt, and they're golden. But I don't have any compost right now to use for that. So instead, what I'm going to do is, when it gets closer to nightfall, I'm going to throw a tarp over both of these beds. And that tarp is going to be sufficient to keep them warm, and I'm going to take advantage of the grommets around the edge of the tarp to staple that down with landscaping staples so that it stays put. So that's what I'm going to do here, and what you can do in a situation like this where you've got a big in-ground bed area that you want to protect. And oh, over there I've got another eggplant. I can build it a paper hat or throw a pillowcase over it or something like that. So don't panic right away. I'm probably going to lose some things, but I'm not going to lose everything. Alright, the edge of my cold frame is in this shot. What I'm going to do to buckle that down against the cold, of course, I'm just going to close it. Let me show you fastening and protecting for covering a tomato. So I'm going to take off my Velcro tomato strap here. These are incredible. I reuse, this is my second or third year using these, so even though they're made of plastic, I'm not contributing a lot to plastic waste. And if you tie up your tomato and you change your mind, this allows you to redo things. So I've got my piece of, in this case, fleece, but remember, you can use whatever you have around the house to protect your tomato. Oops. Velcro. As soon as I can untie it from the pole, just go like this. Put this through. I'll take my tomato tie. Just fasten this at the top. Boom. So that part's pretty well in place, and I'm going to come back around and get around the edges with landscaping staples to hold this down. And because this is agricultural fleece, I can actually just leave this fleeced up for the next couple days. They'll be overcast, things won't overheat for this tomato. Alright, as you can see, I have covered and buttoned up pretty much everything that is going to stay covered for the duration of this 2-day frost cycle. So I've got all of my hoop beds that need to be covered, where I haven't been able to cover the whole bed because of excessively tall stakes. I've covered the individual plants that need to be covered. So over here you see tomatoes, and behind them you see my loofah gourds, each with their own individualized wrapper. The eggplants are going to get their own cover at night, but not during the day because I didn't have enough fleece. And I also realized that right here, these potatoes are exposed and will need to be covered. So we're going to hill them up in this video, despite what I said in the introduction. What is hilling up? Hilling up is when you add more stuff to cover part of your tomato plants. When should you hill up? Probably when they're about this tall, and definitely before they get to about that tall. There's no hard and fast rules. Why do you hill up? You hill up to protect potatoes from being exposed to sunlight and turning green. At best, green potatoes taste bad. At worst, they're poisonous. What do you hill up with? Today I'll be hilling up with potting mix because I reserved some to hill up with. And I didn't know when I was planting these guys that they are some of the least picky plants with regards to soil quality that you can grow. So you can hill up with anything. I could dump unfinished compost in here, or finished compost in here. Straw is great. Leaves from last autumn, great. It doesn't matter what you hill up with, as long as you have 4 to 6 inches of it to hill up with. And with that said, let's dump some in. Ooh, hold on, I've got drip irrigation in here. Let's pull that out and then hill up. Quite likely you're going to wind up bearing some leaves when you hill up, and that is fine. But you do want to keep some leaves exposed when you're done with your process, because those leaves are going to produce the calories that your potato plants need to make potatoes. Ultimately, that's why we're growing these. Although I think that I could just grow them because I think they're pretty. I'm especially excited to see their flowers with my own eyes, because the pictures I saw of potato flowers are, I think, gorgeous. So the parts of your potato plant that are underground are safe from short frosts. The parts that are exposed to the air are going to not be as okay. So by doing this, I am making more of the potatoes safe from the cool and possible snow that's coming our way. I think this is a great point to wrap up the video today. We've covered so many things for the frost and because we're hilling up potatoes. I hope it's been fun. I hope it's been informative. I hope I haven't rattled on too long about things you didn't care about. But it is a good idea to, when you see cool weather coming, cover up your frost-tender plants. Tomatoes are going to be at risk anywhere below 46 degrees Fahrenheit, which is that much in degrees Celsius. And when your tomatoes are at risk, it's just a good idea to cover all of your frost-sensitive warm weather plants, just to be on the safe side. It's better to take unnecessary precautions than not to have taken a necessary precaution. And just as a final thought, this is a little bit scary for us as casual gardeners, folks who can go to the grocery store and get the food we need in a pinch. People like us who do something else for a living. Let's take a moment and think about the real farmers who this is their livelihood. A late frost can bankrupt them. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I see a lot of backseat farmers on the internet who complain about farmers not being innovative enough, or, well gosh, the list of complaints is endless. The reason they're not taking risks all the time is because they are riding a thin line between solvency and bankruptcy. And we kind of need our farmers, so cut them some slack. There are agricultural research stations in just about every state in the union, and they do research innovative ways to farm, and they also research ways for farmers to actually implement those new techniques without taking unnecessary risks. Innovation is happening. It's not happening fast enough, but the way we've set up our system, they can't afford to be innovators all the time, okay? So cut the farmers some slack. You may have your pet projects that mean everything to you at home, and more power to you. But not every farmer is going to be comfortable taking the risks that come along with your method. And that's one reason also that I shy away from telling you how you should garden. I'm going to tell you the broadest possible way to deal with the situation, or I'm going to be very clear that that's just how I'm doing it, not necessarily how you ought to do it. So tune in next time, when hopefully we'll find out how this worked, and I really hope that it works, and I can have enough tomatoes later on to show you how to prune them and train them up a stake. Thank you for watching this video, and
I hope your garden grows well.